appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. How you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good today, sir,
Good.
because part of my family and friends are here, and all you nice people from the radio station.
Well, we're here to talk to you about your experiences because you represent a generation that we can't ever forget about.
Oh, wait a minute. Talk about my experiences.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not all of them. Just the,
No.
just the ones that you want us to share, I hope.
Yeah.
So I want to go back, of course, to before you entered the Army. You grew up in New Jersey?
I grew up in Fairfield, New Jersey. That's Essex County. And went to grammar school, and I went to high school in Patterson, Central High, because they had a special program for future farmers of America.
Did you grow up on a farm?
Yes, my father had 70 acres.
Wow.
My father and uncle together had 70 acres. And it was mainly vegetable farming.
So you grew up country strong, right?
Yep.
Eating good food, natural food, vegetables, and working a farm's not easy work.
It's very rewarding.
Sure.
You plant a seed and then you watch it grow, and then you harvest it and it goes off to the market for people to use.
Gotcha.
Very nice.
When you decided to enlist in the Army, was
I
there...
didn't enlist.
You did not. Go ahead.
When war came along and things got tough, I got a job at Curtis Wright. I thought I'd do my share that way. And I'd work at partly days on the farm and partly nights in the factory. In 42, they decided that they needed me in the Army.
Do you remember what that was like, or how they told you? Did somebody call you? Did somebody
They
just meet
called
with
me
you?
down to the Newark Armory and gave us our physicals and sort of interviewed you to find out what your background was, you know, what kind of work you did. And then on January the 1st, 1945, was my first day in the service.
It was. Where were you stationed?
After they inducted us, then they put us on the train. We went to Fort Dix, New Jersey.
Okay.
And after we were there only a week, they put us on a train, and we said where we're going. And they said west. That's all they said. We wound up in Salina, Kansas, Camp Phillips. And that's where we stayed for a year. I was trained for the combat engineers because of my background, and other fellows had their background, and that's why they were there.
Gotcha.
And you got infantry training and you got engineer training.
Did you enjoy one versus the other?
I was sort of trying to talk to my mother. I'd like to go home.
Right. There was no shot that was going to happen, though.
I liked the engineers, but they sort of chose me to be a machine gunner, and they sent me to school. And I wound up being in charge of a machine gun. They sent me, it was a T5 corporal rating.
I imagine a machine gun like that has got to be pretty heavy, right? Like, was it hard to learn how to hold a machine gun like that? Was it heavy?
You have to learn how to take it apart and put it together in the dark. Because in using them, especially the old ones back then, they were air-cooled and they would get overheated and jammed. So you'd have to take it apart and put a new barrel in and a new projector.
Got it. When did you eventually get shipped off to
We
war.
were shipped off in January.
And where did you go? Did you go directly to New Guinea? Was that the first stop you made?
First stop was Goodenough Island to become acclimated to the country
Right.
and also to the wild animals and so on. And it was primarily a safe island. There were no enemy on it. It was Wewak. That was our first invasion. But we were cushion troops. And we came in behind. We weren't the first layer to come in. We were the second. And we got a gold star for that. And then lo and behold, then it was in Hollandia, Dutch New Guinea, we were on the first landing, and that was a big, fairly big convoy and everything, and we got a silver star for that.
Do you remember on either of those landings, was there immediate combat?
Pretty much so. When we first landed in Hollandia, Dutch New Guinea, yes, we had Hollandia, we had comparatively immediate combat, like from here to that tree out there. And I'll never forget, of course you didn't take the machine gun in there. I was with my rifle going in, and I felt this tapping on my shoulder. What the hell's going on? Chap wants to see my face, sir. And I looked up and he said, "Young man, you'll be fine, that God is with you. I'm the father from the Catholic,
Yeah, I'm with you.
Catholic
With the church.
religion."
Right.
And so I went on, and by golly, he must have been right. And we went on in there, and had a few lumps and bumps. And one of them was that the competition wasn't too good. And we advanced a mile the first day. But the reason one of the things is that it wasn't good. Our supplies were on the beach for maybe the next couple of days. Well, the Japs knew that. They come in with their bombers, kamikazes, whatever, and they took care of our supplies. And that was the first I ate Japanese food. We took the cans off the dead Japs, out of the dead Japs packet, and it consisted of fish and rice, of course. And then we proceeded in there. And then they asked us to set up a sawmill.
Okay.
They called it a portable sawmill. And they asked me if I would run up by the Sawyer, because I had some experience being on the farm. I worked in the fall on the lumber yard. And so I did. And a couple of the guys that was working with me didn't have experience, and they unfortunately let a log go, and it ran over my left leg and damaged my foot and also my back some. But then they cut out part of my shoe, and I stayed on. They told me I could go back if I wanted to, and I said no,
Why did you say no?
because I met all these nice guys, and I had been with them now 2 years or more. And I wanted to stay with them. I didn't want to go in with some unknown guys. And so I stayed with them, and that's when we went into Guinea Gulf, Luzon, Philippines, off the China Sea. And that was the first wave. And we had a pretty rough time. And we were attached then. See, each time we were attached to somebody else. We were attached with the 1st Ranger Division, and they sent us into Cabanatuan, Philippines, which was the #1 prison camp for the boys with death of March.
Right. I want to talk to you about that. There's been a number of books written about that. The group of men that were put together that worked with, I guess, some Filipino national guys who knew the way around that you guys didn't know. That you guys, MacArthur decided, we got to go rescue a bunch of POWs. So when they first came to you to make you a part of this group, did you know what the mission was at the beginning? Did they tell you that you're going to rescue guys?
No. We were with the 1st Ranger Division, and they sent us in there into the prison camp. And I'd say 90% of them, we took them down to the docks and put them on hospital ships.
Do you remember when you first came upon the POW camp? And do you have a memory of that moment when you discovered the camp?
No.
No?
I don't want to say and then be wrong. At the time was so excitement. Why, these guys have been captive for 3 years. Can you imagine being a prisoner for 3 years?
Those guys lived through a lot of really bad stuff in that place.
Pardon?
Those guys lived through horror
Yeah.
for a long time.
And so when we took the first ones out, well, boy, they were thin. And there was 800 left out of 3,000. And they took them to Australia.
Okay.
We put them on the hospital ship, and they were taken right to the. And then, so anyway, we went on with. We stayed there, and they hooked us up with General Dalton and his boys, the 132nd, I think it was. I hope people aren't holding me to the numbers in time.
You're good, don't worry. I want to ask you one more question about when you got to the POW camp. Were there Japanese forces protecting the camp? Were you guys fired upon? Was there any type of...
Oh, yeah, around it, yes,
There was?
Yes.
Can anything possibly prepare you for that experience?
Well, we had some smattering of training to watch out for, not snipers, but clusters of sharpshooters on their side. And of course, and that you had all the time, almost anyway, when you were on a machine gun. Because that was one thing they said, Warren, you know, you're the front point of being attacked because of being a machine gunner. I said, well, what would you want me to do? Go back to the United States? Oh,
Do you remember at any point being afraid?
oh, my Lord, sir. I was afraid a lot. But I always, when you're afraid, you think back to certain things in your life. And I'd always think back to that minister patting me on the shoulder and saying, God will be with you. And then when we went and got attached to the 132nd General Dalton, he had a great record.
When you got attached to his unit, was that still in the Philippines?
Oh, yes.
It was. And what were you guys? Do you
I
remember
was
what
in
you
the
were,
Philippines.
do you remember what you were doing for his
So
group?
then, that's what I wanted to say. This was going up through the northern part, and it was a pass. I don't know how wide it was, but there was high mountains on both sides. And the first day of advancing, we lost. And when I say we, I mean all the people around. We lost 1,500 in a mile. Yes, 1,500 men in 1 mile. And up at the top of Bloody Pass, there's a monument for General Dalton and his boys. And actually, that was just about at the end of our combat, and we had to work on the road, and we had to be helped with the combat. They took me and our other machine gunners away from our unit,
Right.
to be with the infantry unit. Yeah.
When you started talking to some of the survivors that you saved in the Philippines, did they share any stories with you about how they were treated by the Japanese?
I saw it. They don't tell me. They don't have to tell me. I saw how some were misused. Yes, there was the one situation in Cabanatuan where they laid 10 men with their heads in a row, and they took a truck and ran right over it. And unfortunately, we had a man, he was up in the front line, a rifleman, and he sort of flipped his lid, took his rifle and ran right to the enemy. When we found him, every bone in his body was broken, and his privates had been cut off and stuffed in his mouth. And that's about the end of it. That's enough.
I got you. I appreciate you sharing those stories and memories with us. How long after that did you get to come back home?
We were pulled down, especially the engineers, because there was a area called the Rizal Stadium, was all their sports, baseball, basketball, football, whatever was playing, that's where it was played. And they took us down there we'd be given a certain amount of enemy, and they had to work to start building it back up. Because what happened when they left, they set charges in front of the nice buildings that they had, and inside of them, some of them. And so that was, I was actually the last.
One of the stories is that it was hand-to-hand combat was very difficult because Japanese soldiers they made it tough to wrestle with them, right? That they would put grease on their bodies, things like that.
They were tough. They did different things to make it tough and to work on your nerves. And one night that we were in sort of a swampy area, and this was in Hollandia, Dutch New Guinea. and they took the men, took all their clothes off, and greased them.
That way it was difficult to grab onto them if you had to fight.
It was awful. It was awful. You know, and one day, I don't know, there was a group of us guys standing around, whether it was at the VFW or where, and they said, "Boy, you must hate the Japs, Warren." I said, "Well, there's a group that I wouldn't throw my arms around and say I love you, but after all, who put them on earth? Who put them on earth? God put them on earth just like He put you on earth. Am I right?"
100%.
So that was that.
What was it like for you when you came back home?
Well, it was rather rough, and I don't know why. My father sort of disliked me. Now, I was the youngest of 3 boys in the service. My oldest was in chemical warfare, and my other brother, he was in the Navy. And then there was me. He didn't want me in the house. So my sister was kind enough, and brother-in-law. They had an extra room. It was like a mother and daughter house. They took me in, and that's where I lived until I met Madge.
Pardon me for asking something so personal, but did you ever reconcile with your father?
Oh yes, yes. And there was a lot of good things that went with him and being my. He went fishing with me. You know, I think I've talked enough, sir. I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate your time. I know a lot of it's tough to talk about, so I appreciate you sharing it. I hope it was okay for you to talk about it.
I can say one thing, and I'll tell anybody. If it was to do over again, I guess I would do it, because this country needs people to keep it going.
Yeah. Well, hearing your story is amazing to me, and I really thank you and appreciate your willingness to share it. You know, I brought my son here today because I think his generation needs to hear your stories so that we never forget them. So I appreciate you sharing those stories with us today.
Thank you.
And I hope it wasn't too uncomfortable for you.
Thank you.